everybody. I think we should go ahead and get started. And for those of you, by the way, who don't know, Brian, the Viking Simmons is in the house today. This is so exciting. And guys, I just got to tell you, today he's talking about how to turn your database into your data bank, right? Like how to make this thing cash flow, just dump money into your business so you're not having to think about where's my next deal coming from and running that same treadmill that everybody's on, right? We want to get you off that treadmill so you can live a good life in real estate. And Brian has exactly set that example. And great trainer, really excited to have you here. Brian, thanks so much for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll hand over the mic. Brian Simmons is in the house. Here we go.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for that
No
intro. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will go ahead and just get started with this. Just dive right in. So who is pumped to talk about databases today? Probably nobody, because I don't think anybody has ever been pumped to talk about a database. But anyways, if you're kind of a nerd like I am, then you might be interested in this stuff. It is kind of fun, and it's primarily because it's so capable. There's so many things that you can do through database, and it's just one of those things that is exciting if you're a little bit of a nerd. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump right on in. So first and foremost, we got to just wonder, we got to answer to ourselves, like what is and what isn't a database? Okay, we've probably all heard the term before, I would imagine. And so we just at first need to actually like define what it is that we're talking about here. So on the most simple, its most simple form, a database is just simply, it's just a bunch of contact information for the people that we want to do a deal with. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. That's at the most simple form. And so you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, I totally get it. Like I know exactly what you're talking about. And in your mind, you're thinking something like this, which it technically fits the description, right? That's a bunch of contact information for people that you want to do a deal with, right? Those Post-it notes. Everybody loves them. I love them. But that is not a database, okay? Neither is this. This is also a bunch of contact info for people you want to do a deal with, but not a database. Neither is this. Big old Rolodex full of business cards or Post-it notes or contact info or whatever. Great source of contact info in the 80s, but not a database by any means. If you were really crushing it back then, you like my man Joe Yates, you probably had a double Rolodex. And if you notice down here in the corner, there's actually a rotary dial phone. So that's just a little indicator of how old these things are. But nonetheless, no matter how sophisticated they were back then, they are not a database at all. Okay. Neither is this calendar. Neither is this messy desktop that still fits the description of having a bunch of contact info that you want to do for people you want to do deals with, but not by any means a database. Okay. So, like I said, they all fit the description, but they aren't it. So you're probably thinking, look, like, okay, well then what is it, right? The database needs to have a few more things than just a bunch of contact info. Okay. It needs to be electronic. It needs to be, what you could call computer-based, right? It needs to store the data. It needs to track the changes and so on. Okay. So I know what you're probably thinking now. Like, oh, okay, I get it. Electronic, it tracks changes, stores the data. Totally get it. He's talking about Excel. I am not talking about Excel. Excel is not a database. If you want to utter those words in front of an IT nerd, they will absolutely lose it, and they'll probably spam your email or something. Okay. Excel is a spreadsheet, all right, not a database, all right, and it's overused, it's abused. And it's that because people know how to use it because it is simple. Okay, that is nice, but it is absolutely not a database. And I'll kind of explain a little bit more about why that is here in a second. Because it essentially just doesn't do the fundamental things that we need a database to be able to do, right? It is a step better than a Post-it note, but it is not what we're looking for in regards to a database. Okay, so what should a database actually do for you? Well, great question. Let's actually unpack that a little bit and address it. So first and foremost, a database should be able to do automation. All right. And if you think about that, underappreciated ice maker in your freezer, It's just in there churning out ice day in and day out. You don't have to do anything to it. And whenever you're ready for that cocktail, you just walk over to that trusty old ice maker, and it has already anticipated your needs, and it already has a pile of nice fresh ice in there ready for you right when you need it, right? You didn't have to tell it to do it. You didn't have to put water in it. You had to do nothing other than literally open the freezer and grab your ice and put it in your glass. Okay. That is a beautiful example of automation. What you needed was available to you right then and there, and you had to do nothing for it. Okay. It's very underappreciated, really. The ice maker. So that's what your database needs to do for you. Okay. But obviously in a different way. So for example, if you have Jimmy, the first time home buyer, who is in your database, okay, and Jimmy looks at the same 5 homes, or looks at the same home 5 times in your database, that database should tell you to contact Jimmy automatically. That should happen without you having to do anything. It should just say, hey, Jimmy looked at the same house 5 times. He's probably interested. You need to give him a shout. Or better yet, it should even give Jimmy a shout for you. It should shoot him a text. Hey, Jimmy, I saw you looked at this house 5 times. Do you want to take a look at it in person? Okay, Excel doesn't do that, right? That's why Excel is not a database. It does not do that, okay? So also reminders. Your database needs to be able to remind you of the tasks that need to be done, okay? And just like that alarm clock, you set it, tell it to wake you up at 5 a.m. or 10 a.m., whatever, no judgment. Whatever you tell it to do, it does consistently all the time, day in, day out, wakes you up at the same time, whatever it is, okay? And your database needs to be able to do the same thing for you. So you need to be able to know, hey, I spoke to Jimmy about those houses. He said he needs to work with a lender. I gave him the contact info for a lender. And then a week later, you want your database to remind you, hey, time to check back in with Jimmy and see if he had that call with that lender, okay? Again, Excel doesn't do that. Post-it notes don't do that. Your database needs to do that, okay? Records. Your database needs to be able to track your communication log or do an audit trail or whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. It needs to be able to give you a history of what you've done with that contact, okay? So when Jimmy, the first time home buyer, comes back, I'll bring it back into the fold here. He comes back in and he's like, he calls you up and asks you kind of about 123 Main Street, right? Like you need to be able to know that he talked to you about 123 Main Street. You need to be able to go back and find out what did he tell you in that first conversation? What was his dog's name? What was he doing that weekend? So that you have record of it to be able to integrate that into your next conversation. Okay. It's very important to have the records that show what you have actually talked about in the past so you remember. Okay. Because if you're talking to a lot of people, it's unlikely that you're going to remember every single detail. Okay. And then last but definitely not least is that it is imperative that your database helps you to simplify. And it needs to be so simple that a damn caveman could do it. Okay. And that's what we're seeing here. If it's not easy, you won't do it either. Okay. So when Jimmy calls you back, you need to be able to find those notes ASAP. So you could be like, oh yeah, Jimmy, how's it going, buddy? Do you have a good weekend? And while he's telling you about taking his dog to the dog park and all whatever he did this weekend, you could be looking up your notes and say, oh yeah, great to hear, man. I'm guessing you wanted to chat about that 123 Main Street property again. Okay. Like that's the kind of simplicity that you need to be able to have. It needs to show you what you need to see right now, very simply. Okay. So that's the whole, premise of what the database should be doing for you. In summary, it's really the database should be taking your contacts. It should be converting your contacts to cash. Really, that's what it should be doing. Okay. And that process can be very, very elementary, or it can be very, very sophisticated. Okay. It can be very, very quick to convert, or it could take a very, very long time to convert. And that may be different for your database or my database, or that may be different from different contacts within your database. Okay. It needs to be adaptable to that. All right. And so what's important to note here is that your database setup needs to be specific to your needs. Okay. So just make sure that you remember that. So anyways, now that we've covered the basics of kind of what the database is, let's talk about how you make that database into a data bank. Okay. So I have absolutely no idea why the database symbol looks like a soup can. but that is what the IT nerds and IT gods went with. So that's what we're stuck with. It's a nice looking soup can for a database, but that is the official database symbol. So that's what that is. So when we're talking about the database, what are the most important objectives of the database? Okay, what are they? Any guesses? I'll just go ahead and tell you. Okay, transact. Transact is the most important objective of our database. That's the number one most important thing we want to do with this database is transact. We want to close deals with the people that are in our database. Okay, above all, that is it, right? Number two, grow. We want to grow it. Number one, we want to transact with the people in it. Number two, we want to grow it. Okay, increase the number of people that are in it. And there's a common, misconception, I would say, that people think that maybe you need to grow your database before you transact with people in it. Okay, that they want to put their focus on grow, put as many people in there as possible. And I do disagree with that. Okay, and here's why. Because if your systems suck and you're plugging people into a sucky system, what is that going to do for you? Nothing good, right? So to put that differently, would you rather plug new leads into a system that's polished and proven to convert, or would you rather subject way more people to your learning curve? Because make no mistake, there is a learning curve. Okay, there will be mistakes made, right? That will happen because not even a question. And those mistakes can make you look careless and they can make you look sloppy. All right, so it's best to get those out of the way early, right? And I don't like to use the term fail. I don't really believe in that word, but there's a really good quote that says, fail early, fail often, fail forward. Okay, and it's spot on. But like I said, personally, I don't love that word because I feel like the word failure kind of indicates a total absence of any sort of value at all. And so therefore you didn't learn anything. And so I feel like in these mistakes, you learn something, you learn what you did wrong, you learn how you could have done it differently. And so there was some sort of value created. And it's hard to say, in my opinion, that that's a total failure. Okay, so I digress. So let's get back on topic. Some examples of what can happen though in these mistakes and why you want to have a polished database is you might say to a client that's in your database or contact, we should call them, you might say to them, hey, ring, ring, hey, should I get you set up with new listing alerts? And they already have them. Your system already set them up for you. Okay, but the fact that you didn't have it polished means that you call them up to ask them if you wanted something or if they wanted something done that had already been done. So they're probably thinking that's weird. Why would he ask that? Okay, you might also ask them, hey, what'd you think about this house, when your automation already sent it to them? Okay, so that in that example, you're sending them a house saying, hey, what do you think about this one? And they've already seen it because you already sent it. That makes you look bad. Okay, another thing is your automation could reach out to them and say, hey, Jeff, I'm just checking in with you, seeing how you're doing today. When you literally just talked to them outside of your automation on a phone call an hour ago. Okay, that's the type of stuff those are like true stories. Those have all happened to me. And those can happen. So this is why you need to make sure that you've thought through those types of things. How do you prevent those things from happening? Because like I said, they can make you look careless, sloppy, and overall just not good. And let me ask you this, would you want to work with somebody who's careless and sloppy for the biggest financial decision of your life? In most cases, probably not, right? So it's important to get this dialed in before you grow it like crazy, okay? So back to these objectives, right? So we know the number one objective is to transact, okay? Now, how do we actually do that? Good question. First is we want to make sure that every single person in our database knows that we are a realtor. And this even extends beyond your database. You want every single person in the world to know you're a realtor, okay? You want them to know what you do. If they don't know what you do, how can they know to use you? How can they know to refer you? Like, they have to know what you do. You've got to figure out how to make as many people as possible, make sure that they know that you are a realtor, okay? So don't be one of those people that's like, oh, I don't want to share anything on my personal Facebook page that's work related and blah, blah, blah. Stop it. Like, in this profession, as a realtor, it is your job to sell homes. Okay, you need to sell homes by having exposure. You need to be in front of people. Like, get it out there to as many people as possible so that they know you're a realtor. Okay, that is imperative. All right, and I want to be clear on one thing here. Okay, I'm not asking you to reach out to all these people and try to sell them something. Okay, I'm not even asking you to talk to these people. I'm just asking you to make sure that anybody that sees you knows you're a realtor, sees you on Facebook, sees you on Instagram, sees you on Google search, whatever it is. They see you, they know you're a realtor. That's the important part. Okay, make sure the world knows it. Okay, and then when they know you're a realtor, then you want to stay top of mind. Okay, now that they know you're an agent, you want them to be thinking of you when they think of real estate, right? Because they don't always need you. That's just the facts, right? Like they're not buying and selling every single day, right? They don't always need you. And because here's an example of kind of what their needs look like, right? They're stable. Maybe around here, you know, they have somebody here that's like, oh, do you know a realtor? So their need bumps up a little bit. And then here they need to sell their house, right? So their needs are nothing until they need you. And then when they need you right now. Okay. So you want your outreach efforts, whether it be marketing or dripping through your database, or whatever it is, to be consistent. Because if your effort is consistent, you'll intersect with their needs, right? So if you drip, and they're like, oh, I have a need to refer somebody, then bam, you're right in front of their face. They saw you and you got that referral. You got that listing, whatever the case was. Okay.
Hey, Brian,
Yeah.
real quick, you know, so it's funny, like when we coach agents, and I know you know this because you've done a lot of this work, I think the number one challenge that we hear from agents is like, my business is great, my business sucks. My business is great, my business sucks. It's that yo-yo effect of like, I'm on top of the world to I'm going bankrupt. And I feel like everything you're touching on here absolutely hammers home that if you want to build consistency, this concept of leveraging your database is a huge part of that. And I just love this. And I hope everybody's taking notes. And by the way, I totally screwed up. I'm going to confess here. The first part of this was not recorded. So you and I are going to get on later and we're going to have to remember everything you said word for word so that we can do the front half of this again. So sorry, brother. But anyway, no, I owe you one. First round's on me at shareholders.
Deal. Hold me to that one. So as you can see, I mean, when, you know, their needs vary, right? It's typically like they don't need anything. And then somebody asks them for, you know, hey, do you know a realtor or whatever? And then they need to sell. And that cycle is, you know, what is it? Every 7 years, I think is the average length of time somebody owns a home. Maybe it's 10, somewhere in that range. But that's why it's important to have consistency in your efforts of outreach. If you're not consistent, okay, like you can see in this next line, then you may never intersect with their needs, okay, when their need is strong enough to buy. Because as you can see in this little example right here, yeah, like you intersected with them, they saw you, that's what that represents, they saw you, but when they actually needed you, you weren't there. You were down here, you went on a hiatus of you know, posting on Facebook or whatever. And so that's what's important to know, is that you need to be super consistent if you want to catch them at the right time. Okay. Because if you post 0 times in a month, and that's the month that they actually needed an agent, they found somebody else. Okay. If you posted 10 times in one day, and that wasn't the day that they needed somebody, it didn't matter. Okay. So you need to be there to be found when they need you. Okay. And that's different than reaching out and trying to get them to need you. All right. And so again, I'm not talking about trying to bombard these people, you know, everybody in your database, bombard them with calls and texts. I'm just saying that, you know, you need to be seen, okay, so that you can be top of mind. You want these people to see you consistently, maybe not even hear from you consistently, but to see you consistently. Does that make sense? See you through, you know, your marketing report, your Facebook posts, or whatever. They need to see you, not necessarily you calling them every 5 minutes. Okay. So then last on the transaction side is to provide value. All right. That's the third point on transacting, is you want to provide value, not a sales pitch. Okay. And I'm sure we've all had a lender who just won't stop calling you because they want to work together so bad. Okay. Right. You answer the call the first couple of times to be nice, and then you catch on. What they're really wanting is you to refer them business. Okay. That's really what it comes down to. So now every time they call you, you just send them a voicemail because you don't want to be annoyed. And that's really what that comes down to, is that it's annoying. So don't be that person. Okay. Don't be the one, that they don't want to talk to because they know that you're going to ask them for something, or you're going to try to convince them to sell when they're not ready. Okay. Be the one who provides them with value. Okay. And what that is, what that looks like, it is and should be different for everyone. Okay. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but just know that, you want to provide value to them so that they look forward to your next interaction, not like, oh my God, I need to silence my phone because Bill's calling me again. It's like you want them to look forward to talking with you and hearing from you and seeing your interactions. Okay. And so if every time I called someone in my database, I try to sell them on, why they should sell their home, do you think they're going to want to keep taking my call? Of course not. So if I go, hey, Mr. Client, do you know your home value is higher than it's ever been? And they go, yeah, I do, Brian. I still know that. We talked last week. Okay, well, why wouldn't you want to cash out an all-time high? Well, Brian, we actually, really like where we're at, and it's by our kids and our grandkids. Well, think of all the cool things you could buy. If you sold out, think of all the cool things you could do for your grandkids. You could take them to Disneyland. They like Disneyland, don't they? Right? You want them to be happy, don't you? Sell your house. Like, don't do that. It's terrible experience, right? Conversely, if you say, hey, Mr. Client, I thought I just thought you might like to know your house probably went up about 20% in the last year. Congratulations. We're really happy we were able to get you guys into that home. In case you didn't know, interest rates went a full point lower than when you purchased 2 years ago. So I just thought you might want to know, like, if you refinance, you could probably lower your payment, maybe even take out some equity and put that pool in that your grandkids wanted, right? Who do you think they're going to actually be more likely to refer business to? The person that's giving them some form of value, and that's not even that valuable. Like, you can come up with a lot of other ways to be valuable. You can come up with a lot of other ways to be super annoying. But the reality is that provide value. Like, that's really what this is about. Provide value to them. Don't try to sell them every time you talk to them. Okay. So now that we beat that one like a dead horse, we're going to move on to growth. Okay. So when we're talking about growth, you want to grow that database. Okay. Now we know the transaction side, we're talking about growing now. Okay. Big thing with growing is to know that you need to come up with a lead generation strategy that is yours. Okay. And we're going to talk more about this in just a few minutes, but just know this: what works for me may not work for you, and that's okay. Okay. There's a strategy out there that will work for you. It's just a matter of figuring it out. And I think that's the biggest mistake that people make on growth, is they try to just copy what somebody else is doing and think like, hey, Tracy's doing this, so I'm going to copy that. I work for her, it must work for me. That's not always the case. Okay. And we'll talk again, like I said, more about that in a minute. Another thing is, you got to make sure that you are capturing their information. Okay. If you can't do this, honestly, I would say don't bother even doing the activity. Okay. If you're cold calling or you're door knocking, you need to figure out a way to get their email address. Get creative, right? Tell them, hey, like, I'm going to send you this report of what these recent sales have done to your home value. Where should I send it to? Okay. You can do better than that, honestly. Like, that's just something. Provide them with value. Get their email address in return. Okay. You got to come up with a way to do that. If you can't get their contact info, don't even bother with it. All right. Because then you lose the ability to drip on them over time. Okay. Same thing. If you hold an open house, you need to come up with a way to get their contact information when they come in the door. You could tell them it's a safety requirement. Tell them it's a requirement of our brokerage. Tell them it's something to do with COVID, whatever, contact tracing, whatever it is. Get creative, find a way, and get their information. That's the key there. You've got to be able to capture their information if you want to grow your database. Okay. Otherwise, you're just meeting people. Okay. And then what you really want to do in a perfect world is you want to automate the input of the information. Okay. And there's tons and tons of ways to do this. Okay. There's API integrations. There's services like Zapier. There's all sorts of ways that you can automate the information that's coming into the database. Okay. So for example, if I get a lead from realtor.com, that lead's automatically sucked into my database. And then my database automatically texts them. And then my database automatically emails them. And then my database automatically creates a task for me to call them, and on and on and on, right? Just like that ice maker. Remember, I didn't do anything.
Hey, Brian, speaking of the ice maker, so the ice maker makes ice, right? Like, what are the points of data that you think are most significant that everyone should be trying to have? Like, name, email, etc. Where do you think that ends? Because I see some people getting crazy. They're trying to have every social tag and all this other stuff. And maybe that's great, but what's your thought on that?
Email address and phone number. I'd rather have that than their name. I'll get their name, like that'll come around, but you want their email address and their phone number more than anything. And that way you can just stay in front of them. And I would even say, like, the email address I don't know. It's probably toss up on which one's more valuable. Email address, you can start to get into social media accounts and do retargeting and do all sorts of really cool stuff with that. A phone number, they can just block you and you'll never be seen again. Right. So I don't know. That could be debated.
Yeah.
But yeah. But like that ice maker, the database just did all sorts of cool stuff without you having to do anything. Okay. And that's a key to growth. If you want to grow this, the big key is you want to be able to grow it while you're sleeping. Okay. And that's like the key of passive income, right? If you can start making money while you're asleep, that's like the holy grail. This is the holy grail of your database. If you can grow it while you're sleeping, that's a huge win. Okay. So keep that one in mind. Okay. And so I know some of you still might not be sold, and you might be thinking that this should be the other way around. Okay. That growing should be number one, over transacting. And I think that's a fair take. I still disagree. And I want to walk through a little example here on kind of why this makes more sense for transacting to be number one. Okay. And so we're going to do a little bit of number looking. And so just stick with me. This isn't going to take too long. I don't want anybody falling asleep now that we're talking about numbers. And so let's say, as an example here, in your very first year, you have 200 people in your database. Okay. And these are just people that they're friends of yours, they're friends of friends, they're old coworkers, whatever it is. You reach out to them on social media and you get their email address. You find a way, you tell them you're going to send them something. You've got this incredible report, whatever it is, get creative, find a way to get their information. Okay. Go through your old sent emails, whatever, find email addresses and get them into your system. Okay. That's what the key is. If you get 200 here though, and then you absolutely crush it and you convert 6% of those, that's 12 deals in your number one. Okay. And if you assume a $400,000 average purchase price and a 200 or 2.5% commission, that's 120 grand a year in year one, 120,000 gross commission income. Okay. That's pretty damn good. Right. Okay. And that's, so that's pretty sweet. And you only, and that was converting at 6%. Right. So if you only converted 2% instead of 6, you only did 4 deals and that's 40 grand a year. Okay. So that's 12 deals and 120 grand versus 4 deals and 40 grand based just on the conversion of 2% versus 6%. Okay. So that's the difference of scraping by versus kicking ass. Okay. And that's why the conversion percentage is key. All right. And here's where it also gets cool. Okay. So now that you've done 12 deals in your number one, you now have 12 people who can leave you a review, right? You have 12 people who can refer clients to you. You have 12 people who can edify you as an agent and help you build your business. Okay. And the effect is compounding, right? So this model just shows a 25% increase year over year in your database. Okay. What if you doubled it every year for the first 5 years? You'd be at 3,200 contacts if you did that. 3,200. If you held that 6%, that's like 200 deals a year. Then you'd have 200 opportunities for reviews, for referrals, on all that sort of stuff, right? So it's like a snowball effect. It gets just bigger and bigger and bigger. And it also gets easier and easier and easier to grow. It presents a whole nother set of challenges at that point, but it becomes easier and easier and easier to grow because it kind of takes on a life of its own. Okay, that's the critical mass is what that's called. And we'll talk about that in further detail here in a second as well. So let's come back to the 200, right? So as you go from 200 contacts to, let's say, 1,000, okay? If you're converting 1,000 contacts at somewhere between 5 or 6%, you're talking about, like, let's say 50 deals a year, okay? If you convert that same number of contacts at 1 to 2% a year, that's like 15 deals. So 15 versus 50, that's a substantial difference. That is a totally different business. Okay. And one more example, 200 contacts. All right. If you have 200 at 2%, that's 4. At 5%, that's 10 deals. How much money is left on the table? $40,000 a year, $100,000 a year. That's 60 grand left on the table by converting at 2% versus 5%. Okay. So you just keep on. I mean, the better you convert, the better you end up. Okay. Last example I want to go with is this one at 610 contacts. Okay. Because that's attainable. 610s, you could get there in your first year, no problem. Okay. So if you had 610 contacts in your first year and you converted 2%, that's 12 deals. Like that's that 120,000 gross commission again. Okay. That's good. That's really good money. Okay. But if you converted them at 5%, now you're talking about 31 deals. That's over $300,000 a year just by converting 5%. Okay. Not only are you making 300 grand a year at that point, now you're an icon agent. Okay. Now you're getting a ton of free stock. Now you have a net cost of 0 to the brokerage.
Brian, how many times have you won that Icon Award, my man?
3.
There we go. And he's been here for like 3 years. And you know what I like about this, you know what I like about this modeling, guys, is like, if you look at these numbers, Brian's saying he's showing you a path in your first year in real estate, if you want to, if you're like totally even a failure at conversion, you're still making 6 figures. What's the number one number that I hear from agents when I'm coaching them and they haven't yet hit 6 figures? Every time, world without end, how much do you want to try to make next year? Well, I'd really like to break 100,000. Brian's like, hey, here's the plan. Put them in, do this work, and you're even if you're terrible at conversion, you're still going to hit the number, right? And then if you're great, it's like 6 times better, which is ridiculous.
And can I add to that, Brian? I just love this. And what I find the people I'm talking with is, I don't know 200 people, you know, and that's just not true. Or they wouldn't want to talk to me, or, you know, they're already taken care of in real estate, or all these reasons. So one of the things that I just put in the chat is what they call a memory jogger. And this is set up for a different business, but it's the same thing of like helping you figure out who all those people are. And then the key is not judging whether they're going to be interested or not, because people's interest wanes according to, you know, hey, my best friend's a real estate agent. Well, then they moved out of town. Now they don't have one. If you've been providing value, you have that opportunity. And this is the thing that I see with agents that I work with and have worked with for years. They get 3 years in the business, 5 years, 10 years in the business, and they still don't have a database. And that is why their business is so up and down. And what Brian will show and is showing already is this can be so automated. It still takes work. And this is the thing that people want to forget is we talk all the time, Brian, about important, not urgent. Mm-hmm. Right. And I share that a lot with the community about you want to be spending time in important, not urgent. This is important, not urgent. Feeding your database is important, not urgent. Building this database, taking the time is important, not urgent. And that's where people get wealthy, is when they're spending their time in important, not urgent. So thank you, Brian, on that. But I want everyone to look in the chat and you can download that.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, that's 100% right. If you spend the time to get this right in the beginning of your career or now, whatever, this is something that can pay dividends for your entire career. Okay. Like it is worth spending the time to get this right. Okay. And so back on these numbers, the key is obviously as you convert at a higher percentage, it just gets crazy. Okay. And if you get your database right, you'll be on the fast track to getting to, you know, closing a lot of deals and having a really, really successful career. But that's just the beginning. Okay. And so what happens next is what's super cool. Okay. And this is when you hit the critical mass that I talked about. Okay. And when you do that, the database essentially begins to grow itself. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay. And so the more transactions you close, the more your database will grow as a result of the reviews and the referrals and the happy clients that you have. Right. So when that happens, some things begin to change. Okay. The number one most important thing after hitting critical mass is still the transact. Like that's still number one. Like you still want to do that. But now the growth of your database becomes less of a focus because it's starting to happen naturally. Okay. And so there's a shift that takes place. Okay. Because look, I mean, if your critical mass number, it's going to be different for everybody. But if you're like, hey, in my business, I just want to do 40 deals a year, and that's going to provide me with the lifestyle that I want. And I don't have to have an assistant to do that. And I can just use a transaction coordinator. I want 40 deals a year. I know I can convert 4% all day long. I need 1,000 people in my database. When I hit 1,000 people, I don't need to keep worrying about trying to grow my database. I need to worry more about how to actually transact with them more and more, and how to stay top of mind with them more and more, and how to provide value to them more and more. How do I make them more loyal to me? That's the kind of stuff that shift happens. Okay, so instead of adding to a database, now we are focused even more on managing that database and transacting with the people in it. So any guesses on what the number, well, I told you what the number one thing was here. Any guesses on number two? What is the second most important objective after you've hit critical mass? Number one's transact. Guesses? It's kind of a trick question. Number two is transact. Anybody know what number three is?
Oh.
If you can't guess number three, transact. Transact, transact, transact. That is all that matters when you get to this point. When you've hit your critical mass number, all it is transact, transact, transact. Okay, stay in front of them, drip, 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 drip. Make sure that they know that you're a realtor. Make sure that they know, when they think real estate, they think you. Okay, and so that's all good. You might be thinking like, awesome, great, but how do I actually do that? Like, how do I actually convert at a high level? Okay, and that's what we're going to kind of dive into here, right? So if you want to think about how you convert at a high level, we hit on some of these in the beginning, but the first principle, there's four of them. Okay, number one, first principle is that you need to provide value. All right, you need to come up with something that they want to read, that they want to engage with you on, right? You want something that they look forward to receiving. Okay, I do a detailed market report, and I get a lot of people reaching out to me, asking about it, saying that they look forward to seeing it, they follow it, they love it, they ask me questions about the market, whatever. That's what I do. That's how I do it. Okay, what you do could be totally different. Maybe you provide them with, hey, here's a list of new businesses in town that opened up last month, whatever. Maybe you do a review of a new place, a new restaurant every week. Or maybe you go, on a hike and you review some outdoor activity and you take a video and you edit it down to 60 seconds and you post that every week. Or you interview different business owners, or you record, a random act of kindness that you do each week. Like, that would be awesome. I bet people would tune in like crazy to see that. Okay, maybe you do a puzzle or a scavenger hunt on your newsletter, and there's a prize at the end. Like, whatever it is, make it something that they look forward to seeing, that people are like, oh my God, I can't wait to see Jed's market report because I want to know what's happening to my, my home values, whatever. Like, whatever it is, make it you though. Okay, that's the key. And that's the second thing. Provide a unique experience. Okay, like I said, I do a weekly market report, right? It's definitely not unique to share what's going on in the market. Not a question. Okay, what is unique is the way I do it. All right, there's plenty of agents who share the MLS stats and a picture on Facebook. I think they just got released earlier this week, and you probably saw like 1,000 of them posted on Facebook. But some people even take the time to like dress it up and put their logo on it before blasting it out with some generic, like, it's a great time to sell message, right? Like, that's not unique. Okay, that's fine. You can do that, but that's not what we're after here for this purpose. Okay, so what I do that's unique is I actually interpret the data for them. I tell them what it actually means. I tell them what the trends are. I tell them how it relates to what I'm seeing in the real world with my own buyers and sellers. Okay, and then I tell them what they might want to know if they or somebody that they know is considering buying or selling. So make it unique, make it you, put your stamp on it, put your style on it. I love to nerd out on like the economics of things. And so that's like why this is me. Okay, but if that's not you, then don't try to do that. Okay. The third thing for converting at a high level is to be consistent. Okay. And if you do this right, the people in your database, like, they're going to be looking forward to seeing your market report or your restaurant reviews or whatever it is. Okay, every week or other week or whatever your cadence is. Like, so don't disappoint them by missing a week. At least provide something. Like, if you know you're going to be out of town, schedule it out. or at least provide something. Just do a video on your phone, like, hey, I'm in Mexico this week, so I'm going to review, this taco stand right here. It kicks ass because it's right on the beach. It's amazing. Come check it out when you're in Mexico, whatever. Like, get creative with it, have fun with it. People want to see you. Okay. And so, you don't know who's looking forward to it. Like, that's the thing that's important to know. You don't know who's looking forward to seeing what you're sending every time, right? The photographer that I use for all my listing pictures, he told me one day, he's like, hey, dude, I look forward to that market report every single week because I use that to figure out what my market share is. He knows that when I post that there's, 120 new listings, he knows that he gets about a third of them. And that's what he uses to track his business and his share of the market. I had no idea until he told me that, right? So commit to it because you don't know who's out there looking forward to receiving it, okay? And then the last, but definitely not least, is to stop asking them for something, okay? If you want to convert at a high level, stop asking, right? I know this like totally flies in the face of what so many people have been taught in sales, and some people are going to say, I don't know what I'm talking about here. That's fine, okay? But if you've done what you should, they already know what you do, right? Remember we talked about that? Make sure everybody knows you're a realtor. If you've done what you need to do, they will know what you do. Okay, so you don't need to ask them for a referral, right? That's making the interaction about you, not them. That's not providing them value. Okay, so let me ask you this. Does a waiter at your favorite restaurant ask you, hey, did you enjoy that taco? Because if you did, I'd sure appreciate it if you told 5 of your friends about how good our tacos are, right? You may not know this, but our business is built on selling tacos, and your referral means the world to me, right? My kids won't eat unless you tell everybody how good our tacos are. As a matter of fact, why don't you take out your phone right now, give me a couple numbers, and I'll reach out to them. Or maybe better yet, you could even introduce us. Like, how ridiculous is that? Stop it, okay? They know what you do. And if you do a good enough job, they're going to want to send people your way automatically, right? Just like you do for your favorite restaurant without them asking you, okay? So again, if you do those things, you will get consistent engagement. And that is the key, okay? If you get consistent engagement, that means you're top of mind. And then the next time they hear someone talking about real estate, they're going to say, dude, you've got to talk to Brian or Bill or Allie or Jordan or whoever. They're amazing, okay? Oh, and they did this super cool restaurant review last week. You should check that out too. Like, I went to the one they reviewed last week and it was killer. You got to check it out, right? You want to be top of mind, and that's how you do it, okay? So we've talked about conversion. We've conquered that, okay? Now we're talking about growth. Okay, so how do we grow? Same type of deal, right? 4 key principles. First and foremost on your growth is you got to find your way. Don't be a copycat or a scaredy cat. Can you tell I have a 4-year-old? Don't be afraid to try different strategies, okay? Until you find the one that fits for you. Like, it's got to fit your strengths. It's got to fit your weaknesses, okay? And it's important to know what you suck at. There's a really, really good video from Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, that he goes on this rant about knowing what you suck at and stop trying to change it, okay? I love it. That's like one of my favorite videos ever. Okay, so know what you suck at and build your lead gen strategy around that. If you're terrible at socializing with people and the thought of small talk makes you want to cringe, you probably shouldn't use in-person networking as your primary lead generation activity. You'll be terrible at it and you'll hate your life. It will be miserable, okay? If you also don't know how to log into your Facebook, or you think TikTok's just the sound your clock makes, then you probably shouldn't make social media your primary lead generation activity, okay? You have to find what fits you, okay? Find what fits you and what works for you. And don't be afraid to try new things until you figure that out. It is out there, I promise you. Like, you will find something that works for you, okay? And then when you do that, stick to it, but then start to diversify, okay? Start to find those other things, because what's better than one good lead source? 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. You want to have multiple, okay? Do not put all your eggs in one basket. And here's why. If your lone strategy is to run Facebook ads targeted at people who love to golf, okay, and then Facebook now says it's a violation of their discrimination policies for you to do that, you're screwed. You're dead in the water. Your number one and only lead gen strategy just went away overnight. And that can happen. Okay. So have multiple ways to pull leads into your system. Okay. And then another principle for growth is automation. We talked
Brian,
about
hey, Brian, can I ask you a question on that?
Of course. Yeah.
So, diversifying. Let's walk through that, because I feel like when you were starting, did you focus on just one or two so you could nail them down and get them fully built out? Or did you try to do, because I see a lot of us trying to do 6 things at one time and we don't do any very well. And then we never fully build out. So is the idea to really build out 1 or 2 where you can focus on that, then get them built out before you get distracted? Because that squirrel thing is, Brian's not a high I, you guys. So if you understand disc profile, Brian's a high DC. So he has a tendency not to squirrel as much as the rest of us. But most agents are high ISs and they squirrel. So is the key is it focusing on 1 and getting it done, or 2 before you branch out? How could you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the focus, in my opinion, is you need to actually spend time to think about this. Right. So don't just like, people will be like, oh, I'm just coming in and I'm going to join, whatever company. I'm at Keller Williams. They want me to have desk time. And I'm going to hammer the phones. And that's what I'm going to do because that's what they told me to do. And then I saw Jed did this on Facebook, so I'm going to do that. Like, don't just do something because other people are doing it. Like, think about your strengths, your weaknesses. Like, what do you do? What is your personality? What advantages do you have? Do you know a bunch of the contractors in your area? That's an advantage that a lot of people don't have. Are you involved in, the school board? I don't know, whatever, like some organization. Are you big in the 4-H community? Whatever it is, you have some sort of distinct advantage that other people don't have. And you need to think about what that is. Okay. And then figure out what are some ways you could take advantage of that. And that's the key. So that's where I would start with that type of a thing. If you have 3,000 people following your Instagram and before you even become a realtor, leverage that. Okay. Like, if you live in a beautiful area where you could take cool little like Facebook reels, leverage that. Like, that's cool. That's good stuff. Like, I can't do that. If you live in Salem, you might not be able to do that either. If you live in Arizona where there's palm trees, or if you live by the beach, like, you can do that stuff. People want to see that. Right. So you've got to think about what your distinct and unique advantages, and how you can leverage those things. So that's how you hone in on the first couple of ways. And then you can be like, okay, well, maybe I want to try these other things. I want to buy some leads. I want to try some Facebook ads. I want whatever. And then you kind of go from there and see what starts to stick, is the way I would do it. Okay. So then moving on from diversify is to automate. All right. And so the less manual interaction, the better. Okay. If you can have the system slurping contacts without you ever having to enter them, awesome. That's great. If you can have the system reach out to them automatically and try to get them to call you, that's even better. Right. And if you can have the system categorize them, put them in an appropriate automation campaign so that they get the most appropriate messages and they get contacted again and again and again for years, that is the holy grail. That's what you want. That's how you stay top of mind. Okay. But you got to do it the right way. Again, you're not staying on top of them and just hammering them with sales solicitations every week. Okay. You got to do it the right way. And last, but absolutely, certainly 100% not the least, is to just answer your damn phone. If you want to grow, answer your phone. Okay. This drives me crazy. Like, there's so many people, agents, that just don't answer their phone. When somebody refers a client or their friend to you, and they call and call and call, and they can't get a hold of you, that's a terrible experience, right? Their friend that referred them, if I referred Jed to Jeff, and Jeff, never answers the phone or whatever, it's like, come on, it makes me look like an idiot. It makes them look like an idiot. Nobody wins in that scenario. So just when your phone rings, answer it. Okay, that's probably should be number 1 on this list, honestly. If you want to grow your database, answer your phone. Okay. So to wrap this up, what I want to say, we'll bring it back to the Post-it notes, okay? Because I actually do love Post-it notes, and I really do feel bad for bad mouthing them earlier. While they're not a database, they do, serve a purpose. They are useful, and so I want to give them, just give the Post-it notes a little love again. And so what this says though is spot on, right? The same thinking is going to get you the same results, and the same results is going to get you the same thinking. It's just a cycle. So break the cycle, make some changes, and get that database turned into a data bank. Okay. And that's all I got for you today.
Dude, that was freaking awesome. Oh my gosh. Okay. So here's what I know happens, because guaranteed it. Somebody's watching this today and they're going, this is so much, like, I'm so overwhelmed. First and foremost, what you're talking about this software, what software are you using, Brian? Because I know that's got to be the number one question, particularly probably people outside of maybe EXP as a brokerage are thinking that, if we have some guests here today. But what software are you using that's actually pulling off this automation for you?
I'm using KV Core. Did I free? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Sorry. I think I froze on my own computer screen. KV Core is what I use, and it has all the automation, campaigns, like all the sort of stuff that you can do, all the things I talked about with. I mean, it's pretty killer, but it's not only KV Core that I use. So I use KV Core, and then I have it set up to automatically send my contacts into MailChimp. And then MailChimp is where I do my market report. And then that just goes out every week. Today is the day that I'm gonna do my market report. So later you'll see it. So it's leveraging, again, that automation to be able to get in front of, a couple thousand people a week.
And are you using is there a direct API for that? Or are you using Zapier or or whatever?
There's a direct API for that one.
Got it.
Yeah.
So.
And for Realtor.com.
We've already been out.
What is an API?
Oh God, I can't remember the acronym. It's essentially an integration for one service and another, like in the back end, right? So Realtor.com, Zillow, those bigger, lead generation companies have a direct integration between their platform and KV Core's platform, so that when a lead is associated with your account over here on Realtor.com, is automatically channels over to KV Core, and their contact information and everything shows up in the right fields, in the right way. And then you can create, different settings and stuff to where you could say, okay, now that this lead is from Realtor.com and X, Y, and Z, now I want it to do this campaign. So I have a campaign that's unique to Realtor.com that will say, hey, I got your information on Realtor.com, blah, 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 and start to reach out and talk to them.
So Brian, I think that, I hear the word API and I'm like, what the heck is that? But I know what it is because I've been doing it, right? I just don't know the definition of it. So the idea is when it's an API means it communicates very simply and it's easy to do. Is that
it's automatic? It's not even easy to do. It's not even done. You don't even do it. It just happens.
So it's really like it's not a technical thing on the back end. And inside of KV Core and all those, there's tons of classes, there's tons of trainings on how to make that work, right?
Yep.
Right.
There's KV Core has like a whole page of integrations.
It aligns really well with a question that Tammy just asked, which is, how do we get help with the back end technical stuff? So Tammy, I'll comment on this really briefly, and then Brian, I want to hear you sound off on this, because I think that can feel overwhelming at the beginning, Tammy. However, sometimes the challenge with learning something new is you don't even know what to Google, if that makes any sense. It's like, if you don't know what to Google, you can't go to a search engine and like look it up and get help and feel like you now know something, or find the YouTube video. But if you understand that with KV Core, which by the way, all of us at EXP, we get that for free instead of having to pay the $600 a month. And so guess what? If you have that, if you have Zapier, even a free account, most of the time will get what you need done. And then eventually you can upgrade. But if you're upgrading, it's because you're killing it. So that's great. But all of those things, all those concepts can be found in the knowledge library, which is in the lower left-hand corner when you're logged in on the agent interface in KV Core. So you just click there, and all of that, you can watch the agent success plan right off the bat is a really, really good training, and it's free to all of us. So, we recommend in the launch training, when you come into the community, we recommend you go through that. But if you haven't done it yet, go through that, because that's going to help you a lot. Brian, for you, like when you were learning all this, I know that you have a background in technology, so that's going to give you a little bit of a leg up. But I know that you probably still, you were out there, you were watching videos, you were searching things. What were the greatest resources that you leveraged to learn about all this and to get ahead so quickly?
So I was an absolute nag with the tech department, with the tech support team at KV Core, because when I came 3 years ago, it was a totally different program, really. Like they've made a huge amount of improvements in the last 3 years. And so back in my day, it was a whole different ballgame. Like it was honestly like there was a lot of things that they said would work that didn't work. And so I spent a lot of time working with the tech support and trying to get it just figured out one-on-one with them. But now there's, like you said, I mean, there's the KV Core resources that are direct within like the KV Core support page and all that type of stuff. There's also, I can't remember the name of the lady, but there's a YouTube channel that is basically like dedicated to KV Core. And there's the lady that does it all. And I think she'll even set it all up for you for a fee. But if you just start to YouTube and search for KV Core, it's a lady that has just tons and tons of videos about how to set up a campaign, how to use behavioral automation, how to post the listing onto Craigslist, like whatever, just tons and tons of stuff all there. So I've actually heard of a lot of people on my team. I send them both of those resources, and several of the people have said that resource is actually better than the KV Core training itself.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that. Because I know, so here's what I'd love. You guys, if you have questions right now, what an amazing opportunity to pepper those in. We've got a few minutes left on this part of the training, but by the way, don't bounce. We've got a lot of awesome content coming up over the next 30 minutes. But does anybody have a question where you're like, you know what, this is probably something a whole lot of people are on here are going to benefit from? Because Brian, you have just killed it today. This is so helpful. And I really appreciate you giving your time and knowledge and expertise to everybody. Who has a question that you'd like to just unmute yourself? Just throw it in there. Don't worry about trampling on each other.
How did Brian get the name Viking?
I'll let Jeff
Perfectly relevant to this training. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I said I'll let you answer that one. You're the one that came up with it.
Dude, the guy looks like one. He's like, if you've ever met him in person, it's because he's like 7.5 feet tall. He's got this just awesome like face that looks like he could just come storming at you with a battle axe. That's why.
I think it's the red beard. I think
the red beard might have had a little to do with it.
I have 0% Viking, by the way.
Yeah, well,
according to 23andMe, but what do they know?
I have a quick question for Brian. You said that you use MailChimp. Why would you be using that if KV Core also does campaigns and can send stuff out? What's the difference?
Yeah, so it's great question. It's just a different type of campaign, right? So like what I do out of KV Core is a market report that I can upload my video to, and it's just a simpler system. If KV Core was able to do it as simple as MailChimp, I would totally do it. And MailChimp doesn't cost anything. So it's like, I just go with whoever can do the best, provide the best service, I'm all for it. And that was at the time that I set it all up MailChimp. And because you can, within MailChimp, you can completely customize your whole, email that goes out, right? So I have my email go out to, it's like almost 2,000 people, and it's totally customized every single week. I can upload a video into it and change the layout, and I can do all sorts of different stuff with it. And I don't know that that's possible within KV Core right now. And if it is, I'll have to check it out. But at the time that I set mine all up, it wasn't.
Yeah, that's really helpful. In fact, MailChimp's deliverability rating also is really high. And so, Brian may actually, some of his emails may be getting passed that wouldn't have gotten passed on the KV Core IP address, because they're coming from really technically, if you're looking at all the email mumbo jumbo that's on the back end, all the MX servers, it's coming from a different place. Even though it's coming from the same email address, that's not foundationally how email works. And so you can just know that since he's sending from 2 different places, one of the unintended awesome consequences might literally be that he's getting more emails into inboxes, especially since I'm sure has a really large database.
Yeah, and it gets, so the way that I'm doing right now, it's like 30% open it and see it every week. So it's like, you know, pretty decent. It's not the best in the world, but it's pretty good. So
Hey,
Lexi,
Brian.
go ahead.
Hey, Brian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, so what is the advice you would give to people who do not currently, nobody's asking you to tell us who you are, but for those people that don't have their database together, either it's disorganized or they've never uploaded, you know, their data, they just have it in some like, you know, list somewhere. What's your best advice for them to start now? Because that's, I think for a lot of people, that's the hump they simply can't get over, is they face that task and they're like, oh my God, I can't do this.
Yeah, no, great question. And it is definitely, you know, overwhelming to think about because it's a big jump. But if you kind of take it as baby steps, right? Like you eat an elephant one bite at a time. First bite is start to get those contacts into, I hate to even say it, but an Excel sheet. Because if you get all of them into an Excel sheet, you can then import them into your database. Okay, and so that's going to be the easiest way to import them. If you had to manually go in and like create, okay, I'm going to type in Jeff Richmond and Jeff's phone number is 123 blah blah blah, and then Jeff's email is blah blah blah, and I'm doing my typing motion, you can't see, but if you had to do that for every single person and you had 200 of them, that would take forever. If you can get them into an Excel spreadsheet somehow, like that's simple, right? That's a lot simpler than the way. So it's easier to input them into an Excel sheet than it is to input them into KV Core, is probably the best way I should say it. So that would be step one. Get them into Excel, and then you can import them into KV Core. And then when you get them into KV Core, now it's just a matter of like, okay, what do I want to do with them? And there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with tagging them through hashtags and all sorts of different stuff like that. And I think Liz did a really good training on that. And so you could check that out in the community center to see Liz's training on those. But there's a lot of different things that you can do with it. So it's really just get the people in there and then figure out what the capabilities are so you know how you want to actually leverage it and leverage your database. So that's the couple things I would start with.
Hey, right, Brian, just really quick to add on to that. One of those things that I like to do when I'm working, especially when I'm transmigrating data into a database, is to say, like, when you have it all in your Excel spreadsheet or wherever you're keeping it right now, to say, hey, what are some things I might want to do with this information? For example, maybe you're somebody who loves to send birthday cards or house anniversary cards, or you send a postcard when you talk to somebody, whether that's just a phone call or you have a listing meeting or you meet with the buyer, whatever it is. You know, think about that data that you might want to put in there, like little notes, or that date if they're a past client. Or maybe it's a new habit that you want to start. One of the things that I learned in a different position, but where we did a lot of data work and we were able to create fields that we would later use for whatever, is that I would take notes and have a couple of keywords, and then those keywords would come over to me in a reminder, and I would write a postcard to that person and send it. And those like little keywords that came right out of my notes field were populated there for me. So it was really easy. So maybe like in KV Core, one of those formats is, hey, I just wanted to say happy anniversary for, you know, your house purchase, blah, blah, blah. And you put that in and you just have that automate for you in KV Core. So you're utilizing not only the upload of your data and you're kind of working your brain muscles a little on memory for those items, but then also integrating kind of a cool function that you already have at your fingertips to make ice with your client base, basically, right? So thank you, Brian. This has been freaking awesome. And not to change the subject, so I won't, but I'm just going to move it a little bit, if you're okay with that. I know that since you're such a data junkie, you're also utilizing KV Core or some other database and data in recruiting efforts. So can you maybe talk to us, since we're in the last half hour? I think it would be really interesting to hear about how you and others on the call are using data and or their database or data bank to recruit other agents to have those sometimes awkward but really important conversations about EXP.
Yeah. So yes, you definitely can use your database for attraction efforts. And I think that it's a smart thing to do, because you get to utilize, it's all the same benefits, like automation, scalability, all those, consistency, all that type of stuff. The challenge with reaching out to other agents versus reaching out to people who might be, buying or selling, is that generally, like, your conversation with other agents, in my experience at least, varies so much from agent to agent that it's hard to create an automated campaign that keeps you relevant. Because I think, like, and maybe it's just in my own experience, but it seems like kind of the, for lack of a better word, but the bullshit detector is a little bit stronger with agents than it is with just the standard, person looking to buy or sell. So, like, if you start sending them, just, hey, how's it going? Hey, how you doing? That kind of stuff, like, they kind of start to catch on and know that they're in a marketing campaign. And so that's one thing that I think is a challenge and worth, giving some thought to, is, maybe you want to be really, really specific about the types of campaigns you do on the attraction side of things. But there's certainly a place for it. And it's really just about figuring out what that is, and again, like, what works for you and making it unique to you.
So when, as you say that, Brian, because one of the things that I understand, and I know you understand because you're top also a growth leader at the company, is, part of the opportunity, obviously, with EXP is to have great conversations with agents. And if, and only if, you actually provide value, it kind of goes back to your, like, provide value. That's key number one. If you really provide value, then you can start generating passive income in this company because you've provided value. But again, it circles back to that about providing value, providing value. Are you leveraging your database in your attraction efforts? So when you're communicating with agents, are you providing value? And if so, what does that look like? Is that part of a conversation that you're having? Are those touch points? Is it, hey, check out this article? Or what else?
So I've tried a lot of that, and it's definitely not, again, this is unique to me. It's, for me, it's not, hey, check out this article, or hey, let me share the latest and greatest new things that have been going on here. That for me never has really gained any traction. What's gained traction, what I tend to like to do for my own use, what I've seen to be effective, is if I use my database and the automation to create a reminder for me to reach back out to somebody. Okay, so if I had an actual conversation with you, Jeff, and I didn't just run you through my script, and we just actually had a genuine conversation about what your business is like and what your needs are and where you're going and what your goals are. And we had, like, a real conversation. We had a connection. I feel like I would cheapen that by just throwing you into some automated script that just is like, hey, Jeff, I was just thinking about you today. How you doing, buddy? Like, hey, did you see this article about the EXP stock? Like, it just doesn't, I don't like doing that. So I would rather create a reminder for myself to follow back up with Jeff in 2 weeks and send him an actual, like, personalized text or email or call or whatever that I can tie back to our conversation. So that gets back to that whole point of, like, your database needs to provide records so that you can go back and see what you just talked with them about 2 weeks ago. Because if I remember, Jeff told me that he's going to go on vacation, he's got this camping trip lined up and he's super pumped about it, and, like, he's going to hike this trail he's always wanted to hike. I can call him, like, when he says he's going to be back, be like, hey, dude, how'd that hike go? Send me some pictures, whatever. Like, you can have just a much more, like, authentic connection if you do it that way. But that's not the only way. I want to just be clear about that.
Ask, do you think that there is a place for some of that top of mind awareness, though? Even just it's like, hey, just want to stay top of mind. Let me know if you want to chat this week or something. Because the reason I ask is the Clearwater guy, or for the benefits, the health benefits, does that about every 2 weeks for me. And I booked a call with him. He's been doing that same thing for, I don't know, like 3 months. but I think it's the personality of the agent who you're talking to, because if he called me every other week asking me, oh, how's the family and how's this, and kind of the bullshit of, the like trying to get the personal side of it, I think I would have completely blown him off. And now I feel like I actually booked a call with him just because he stayed top of mind every 2 weeks and saying, hey, it's Jeff with Clearwater. Here's my calendar. Let me know if you want to book a call. And it was, it was just like, I think it has to do with the disc personality too, right? Of who you're dealing with across.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course there's a place for it. It just, it's all, tailored to you, and what your goals are, what your personality is, what, the people that you're reaching out to, all of the above. I mean, I've tried doing a lot of what we've, just described of like, hey, do you want to talk again? Or, hey, do you want to revisit this? And those sorts of things. And the effectiveness in my experience of that versus me being able to just shoot a more personalized message out, it's been substantially different. But that's my own experience.
Brian.
So definitely not a one-way street. It's like, it can be different for everybody.
So I see, Chad, I see your hand up there. Give us 1 second. Brian, I love this because it kind of gets down to like what JJ's playbook there could work, right? Like if you, because it goes to earlier in the conversation, JJ, where Brian was talking about your conversion percentage versus the number of contacts, which is kind of a classical like quantity versus quality conversation, right? Like that's really what we're talking about there. And quality will I think work really nicely, especially with agent conversations, because you don't have as many people that you can just burn through, right? It's like burning down the forest. If you have 80,000 agents at EXP and everybody starts doing that, that becomes messy, versus what Brian's doing creates a more permanent connection. So it's more likely that that person will not just transact, but will actually transact with him, which I think is important, because we all know that you can get someone excited about EXP and watch them kind of transact with another person. It's like, well, that isn't the intent here. So I love both things though, because I think part of the conversation could be, how do I increase my volume while maintaining a sense of personal touch, right? Chad, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to get your words in here, brother. How you doing, man?
Good.
There we go.
I'm sorry. This has been a question that I've been wanting to ask for 4 weeks now, and it's so elementary. I'm embarrassed to even say it, but I've got, let's say, Jeff Richmond in KV Core. I put him in there. I've got his phone number. I've got his email address. Now what? Is there information? Where do I find the information on where I go with that next and how I utilize that information to the best of my ability?
Yeah, so that gets back to like, what is your intent? Like, is Jeff somebody that you just want to stay in front of him? You eventually want to do a deal with them, and whether or not Jeff's another agent that you're trying to, to attract EXP, or if Jeff's a potential buyer or seller, it's basically the same thing either way. Like, you need to just figure out like, what is your unique, way that you engage. Right. And so like I talked about, for me with buyers and sellers that are in my database, my unique way is like, I get in front of them with my market report every single week. And that's my like steady, consistent thing that happens all the time. And so maybe you have that type of a thing that you create for the buyer and seller side. On the attraction side, if Jeff is an agent that you're trying to bring into EXP, then what I would suggest there is like, you can go into KV Core and you could just say, hey, create a reminder. It's just a follow-up task reminder, and say, follow up with Jeff in a week or 2 weeks, or whatever the cadence is that you want to go with there. And then it's going to pop that up on your dashboard, and it's going to show you like, hey, on this day, follow up with Jeff. And when it happens, when that pops up, do it. Stick to that. And then when you do it, if you called him and he wasn't available and you left him a message and you said like, hey, what's up, Jeff? It's Chad. I just, want to reach back out and just check in with you, see how everything's going, whatever. Like, whatever your message is that's up to you. But how you use the system is that way. Like, you create those tasks, you create those reminders. And if you want to get further than that and do like what JJ was talking about, where you're saying like, you automatically have it reach out in these various ways that are more, I hate to even use the word generic because but that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even sometimes you can position it as that. It's like, hey, you just tell the realtor flat out, listen, we all run 100 miles an hour. You know what a CRM is. Is it all right if I put you on my CRM to contact you once every 2 months to just stay top of mind? Is that cool? Just be honest and transparent about it, because realtors know what a CRM is. My question to you, a follow up to Chad's question on that, what is true to you as far as recruiting CRM and personal deals CRM, like your real estate transactional CRM? Are you doing that in one central place, everything together, or do you separate the two and have two CRMs to keep that business separate?
Are you asking me that?
Yep.
Yeah, I use separate. I had used, I think, there's some big benefits to the CRM Grow is what I use on the attraction side. There's some big benefits to that versus KV Core, where, primarily that you can send somebody a video and see if they watched it, that kind of stuff, see if they opened your email, those sorts of things. So it gives you a little bit more visibility into like what their actual interest level is. And then if they told you like that they're not interested or whatever, and like they saw the video, you could tell that they actually didn't, stuff like that, like just gives you a little bit more visibility, which I think is more valuable than what you can do through KV Core. KV Core gives you a lot of opportunity to do things on the production side. Like you can see, I can see if Jeff saw how many houses did he look at? Did he favorite this house? Like I can see that stuff, which is great. But you can't do that with an agent in KV Core. They're not looking at houses, right? So.
And by the way, Chad, just in case you missed it in the chat, I saw a couple people post in there. Liz Boisvert did a really great, another icon agent, by the way, here in the community, great leader, did a great training a few weeks back, maybe a couple months ago, actually, on KV Core. She's a trainer for the company as well, and trains on that platform. But you might want to go back in the community center and watch that training. What you're looking for, Chad, is probably campaigns, which is how you can start to build out some of this automation. So you're going to want to use that word, campaign or campaigns, for how do I start to build something that has a standardized way of creating these touch points. It can alternate between SMS and email reminders, et cetera. And that's going to really help you get to the next level. Go in and search for that in the knowledge library there in KV Core, and you'll get a ton of training on that stuff. It's going to help you a lot. Now, Brian, I know that you know several people who leverage KV Core for growth, or CRM Grow for growth. And I also, or Lexi and I also build inside CRM Grow outside of KV Core for growth. But I know people who are doing it really successfully in KV Core. And the truth is, if you guys don't want to spend extra money, you're already in the community, so you're at EXP. Guess what? You already have KV Core for free. So don't add another line item expense until it makes sense for your business, and build out in KV Core. I think it can work. So there, just so you guys know, there's no one right way to do this. I think what you need to be hearing, and it's clear that Brian is an obvious advocate for this, is if you're not using a database, however, you're not even playing the same game. Like, right. It's just not the same thing.
So can we add to this, guys? So what I love about what Brian's saying, and this is really a matter of it doesn't really matter whether it's traction or building your real estate business. The first thing he says to me is like, oh man, first he's doing all this stuff, then he's going to be having, then he's putting notes in, then I got to call this person back. And then all these things go, well, how am I going to do that? I get busy. And Jeff brought that up, like agents have this feast or famine, right? We're busy and then we're not doing it. So I think the key to realize is, and we've talked about this in past calls, is that first we have to be disciplined about scheduling time that we're going to work on our database and we're going to follow up with people. And that's the key, right? So no matter how busy you're getting, you still got to return those calls or it gets lost. So that's where we start with these basics. And then it's starting learning, how do we start delegating things? So that's that next step. How do we outsource certain things in our business to get it simpler? How do we make sure that we control our schedule? Because the key is, when you're busy, you still have to be making these calls so that you don't have this up and down. Can you relate to that, Brian? Can you share that? Just what your thoughts? Because I know I talk about Don't do anything except working on your business, returning calls, follow up until after 12 o'clock. That's my thing. It's like, I don't take appointments to go show houses before 12. I'm not going, when I was an agent doing a lot of deals, I'm not out going to inspections early. In the morning, that's when I'm returning those calls, setting up the reminders, making those calls, because I knew if I did that, my business stayed consistent. How does your mind work around that? And that's the same way with attraction. How does that work in your mind, Brian?
Good question. I mean, I think that it varies on like your stage, right? Like when in the very beginning, I think I was, happy to like just drop anything and everything to go show a house. And I didn't care if it was a $80,000 property and the person wasn't pre-approved. I went for it because that was like my best chance at getting something going right then and there. And so I think that like as your business evolves, the needs change, right? And so that's kind of gets to like what I was talking about with the, as an example, like the database taking on a life of its own and all that, and hitting your critical mass, like that always evolves. And whether you're talking about production or attraction, like if you're attracting your first agent, it's different than if you're making 30 grand a month, that your needs are different and your focus is different. And so I think it's really like much more of a case by case thing, in my opinion.
And what I love that you just said about that is to understand that many agents that we work with and I've seen, they don't evolve. So what that means is they start with that hunger mindset, which is great. Now they're doing 3 deals a month and they're still staying at that hunger mindset, which means the life just gets crazy and it's beyond belief versus, I think every stage in our business and our economics, sometimes we have this saying where it says, I'm going to go back to the basics. And I'm one of those guys, I'm like, I got to go back to the basics. Well, my life isn't today. I don't have the same needs that I did 10 years ago. I don't need to go back to the basics. I need to be thinking differently. And that's where, and so for us that have got businesses that are running, that we've had a lot of clients, but now it's fallen apart. Maybe we didn't set up the basics, which we're talking about database. So that is the basics we have to go to. The way you think when you have a slow month now is different. You're not probably going to go back and chase $80,000 mobile homes because of the different way you've created your finances. So I think that's the key, is that we have to be disciplining ourselves. We have to be thinking differently at each stage, but we have to implement the foundations of how to progress. And I see so many agents that have had great years, but they still don't have foundations. And therefore they feel naked all the time.
It's chaos. Like it just becomes, if you don't have a solid foundation and you just grow a massive database, you have a gigantic mess is what you end up with. And then at some point down the road, if you want to have a scalable business, you have to clean up that mess. And so what I'm saying is like, it's better, in my opinion, and in my experience prior to real estate, it makes a lot more sense to get it figured out, initially and build on a solid foundation. The reality is like, you're never going to have it perfect. Like it's not going to be right. Like it's going to be something though, at least if you have KV Core, for example, that's 10 steps ahead of a notebook full of people or a Rolodex. Like, so you at least have something, and then you can start to maneuver it a little bit and change it this way and a little bit that way. And you start to steer the big ship. But if you have like all of these contacts and all this stuff, and then you're trying to figure out like, well, now how do I actually manage 10,000 contacts? Like, what do I do with all this? Like now you're talking about a whole different problem.
That's why
Whereas if you just got your way there, it'd be way better.
I think what you're saying is that at each stage, if we're building foundations, we're always going to have problems. Problems never go away in life. The question is, are we having higher level problems? The problem isn't I'm broke now and I have no clients. The challenge is, okay, I'm behind in my database. I've still got so much business. How do I get better at that? Who do I need to hire? What resources do I need to reach out to? Where do I need to learn differently versus going from feast to famine, and never having the consistency of a business?
Those are the problems you're looking to solve, right? Those are the good problems. We want to have the problem of having too much business. We want to have the problem of having so many people in our database. Like we want to have that. Those are the problems we want to solve. Not, I don't have any deals in escrow. I don't have anything in my pipeline. I don't know who to even call because I don't keep track of them. Like you don't want to have those problems. That's a whole different ball game. That's like start looking for a different job problem.
What's also apparent to me in all of this, John and Brian, is, well, actually, I'm going to back up really quick. I'm going to say this. By the way, guys, check out the freaking chat box inside KV Core when you're logged in. If you haven't used that, they can answer anything. And those folks are all professionals inside that software. So I am seeing some people say, oh, I have this question, I have that question about KV Core specifically. Just so you know, when you're in there and you're like, I don't know how to upload this CSV, just so you know, if you're like, hey, can someone help me upload a CSV? They can literally, you can drag and drop it into the window. They will do it for you. Like, you don't have to know everything, but if you aren't willing to ask the question to the right person or just use the resources, nothing's going to happen. It will not build itself. However, you also don't have to become the #1 KV Core expert on the planet in order for it to purr like a kitten and work for you. You can just leverage the existing resources, ask the question, tell them what you want to do, and they will help you do it. Okay, so now that said, what I love that I'm hearing on this call that I think is really apparent, and I hope everyone's hearing this, is if you haven't laid out the foundational elements for your building or your building for building your business, guess what? It's not too late. Just act like you're starting over, I guess, quasi, right? Like, you already have contacts, so that's a beautiful thing. You can pump them in. But if you haven't circled back and like, if you don't have a database today and you've been in business for 10 years, and you've done 200 transactions or 5,000 transactions, I don't know, right? But whatever that is, that should all be in a database. So circle back. That's one of those slow down to speed up moments where you could circle back and you could blow past the competition if you simply just got that into a database. The number used to be 250 contacts touched every 11 days in a database correctly across multi-platform would literally be $1 million business in most markets in the US. That's not very much, but that's people who know, like, and trust you. So
I think, guys, when we add on this, one of the things I'd like to throw out, Jeff, is that I'm guessing some people are feeling really bummed out. Like, what have I been doing? Like, what's wrong with me? Why haven't I done this? I've known I need to do it, and it gets overwhelming. And I don't know, I get this feeling like, I don't know, I do. I'm such a loser. What's wrong with me? And what I find is sometimes we won't forgive ourselves. So one of the things I'm going to say now to everyone is, like, the past is the past. It is what it is. Forgive ourselves and move on. Forgive ourselves and start today, because we can't keep being upset about the past. All we have is the future to move forward. And forgive yourself. Give yourself permission to say, I did the best I could. Draw a line in the sand. And if you don't do well for a week, draw another line in the sand. Get support from other people that you need to help. Who do you need to set up with an accountability partner to make sure you're yourself? Do you need to hire a coach to help you get there? Most people aren't doing this without help. Most people have created accountability partners or a coach to help them get there, because this stuff is easy, but it's not simple. And we're our biggest challenge. It's usually not the database. It's us with our limited thinking, or the way that we don't forgive ourselves, or what we don't think we're capable of. Because I know everybody that has the ability to sell a house has the ability to figure out KV Core. It's not hard. It's just, we got to do it.
Yeah.
So I encourage you all to just move forward, man. Forgive yourselves and rock on, and know that you're much smarter than you think you are, and you're much more capable than you think you are.
Totally. And Chad, I see your comment there. Yes, feeling overwhelmed. Listen, the old adage, how do you eat an elephant, right? Like, if you felt like, oh my gosh, this is too much, it's just one bite at a time, man. The Navy SEALs have a thing that they say where it's like, if everything goes FUBAR, I'll let you look that one up on your own. Then guess what? What's the one step that I can take from my current location to get to the next step? And then I'll be able to reevaluate. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's like, well, log into your KV Core if you haven't done that. If you have done that, great. Figure out what you'd like to have happen and ask that question in the chat box, or search for it in the knowledge center, right? Like, that's the next step. And then from there, it'll start becoming obvious what the next steps are, or just call one of us, ask the question, shoot us a text, whatever. I'll give you a few things to go and Google, and then there's going to be 6.5 hours worth of watching on YouTube, and that's going to stimulate your next round of questions, right? So it's a lot of fun once you start understanding where you want to go, and that it's even possible to get there. But I agree with you, John. It's like, if you don't beat yourself up, and sometimes we feel like, I've done everything I can. I've done everything I can. That's great. But there's an old adage, are you doing everything you can, or are you doing everything you should? And I think what we've heard today is what we should be doing. And Brian, thank you so much for being here and for pouring in your knowledge to people in the community, for being such a great leader. Any kind of parting shots for the good of the order here as everybody heads out to implement all this and get a nosebleed while thinking about KV Core today?
Yeah, I mean, the only last thing I'd say is just don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, we're all on the community Facebook page, whatever. Just hit me up. I'm happy to help any way I can. If you want to talk through anything, have questions or whatever, just don't hesitate to reach out. So happy to help you all. Thank you for attending and tuning in and asking great questions. It's awesome. It's a ton of fun.
Thanks again, man. Really appreciate you being here. And we will circle back. We're going to get the first half of this recording done correctly. Thanks again, Brian, for being here. And everybody, go have a great day. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Brian. Good job.